every other academic before Bitcoin never understood what money was. Not really, because at best, all they could do was conceptualize a theoretical money, and no one in the history of the world ever actually implemented a monetary system with a proper money. They were always defective.
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Michael Saylor discusses about Bitcoin. Michael Saylor says every other academic before Bitcoin never understood what money was not really, because at best, all they could do was conceptualize a theoretical money, and no one in the history of the world ever actually implemented a monetary system with it with a proper money. They were always defective, and because they were always defective, whether they're seashells or glass beads or the like, that meant that all economics was, in essence, mysticism and art and politics, but none of it was engineering. You could never engineer a proper economic system until you had a proper understanding of money. But even if I had a proper understanding of money, it's like asking the question, what is steel, 4,000 years ago? And then you say, well, I conceptualize a mineral that's so hard that it won't deflect. Even if I pile up a 100-story building, I conceptualize that. And you say I can't imagine that I can imagine as magic. But now you build one, and of course no one could ever build a skyscraper in 2000 BC. The closest thing to a skyscraper in 2000 BC looks like a pyramid, right? Because you might pause it, but you didn't have it. So there was no construction civil engineering industry because we'd never seen a proper material to build with, so before Bitcoin, I didn't know what money was. Therefore, I didn't really understand economics. And lots of things Michael Saylor discussed, so please watch the video to end. And share, subscribe our channel, Everyday Finance. Thanks.
I think you find that when you go back and read the books of your teenage years with some wisdom, you interpret them differently. And when you watch the movies of your teenage years, when you've got some maturity, you interpret them differently. And my observation with Bitcoin is, before Robert asked me on his show, what is money? I had never questioned what is money. And then we explored it together for many, many hours. And when I finished that exploration, my conclusion was money is economic energy, and there has never been a perfect vessel for the a perfect asset for the transference of money in the history of humanity. Therefore, every other academic before Bitcoin never understood what money was. Not really, because at best, all they could do was conceptualize a theoretical money, and no one in the history of the world ever actually implemented a monetary system with a proper money. They were always defective. And because they were always defective, whether they're seashells or glass beads or the like, that meant that all economics was, in essence, mysticism and art and politics, but none of it was engineering. You could never engineer a proper economic system until you had a proper understanding of money. But even if I had a proper understanding of money, it's like asking the question, what is steel? 4,000 years ago. And then you say, well, I conceptualize a mineral that's so hard that it won't deflect, even if I pile up a 100-story building. I conceptualize that. And you say, I can imagine that. I can imagine it as magic, but then now you build one. And of course, no one could ever build a skyscraper in 2000 BC. The closest thing to a skyscraper in 2000 BC looks like a pyramid, right? Because you might pause it, but you didn't have it. So there was no construction, civil engineering industry because we'd never seen a proper material to build with. So before Bitcoin, I didn't know what money was. Therefore, I didn't really understand economics, and therefore I was never encouraged to think deeply about banking, about politics, about securities theory, about commodities theory, about investment theory, about wealth, about the relationship of wealth to politics, to culture. You didn't really have a practical application of religion. Didn't really think much about politics and political parties, and what is politics other than it's the practical group application of ideology, right? And after Bitcoin, what happens in rapid succession is you say, okay, Bitcoin, what is money? What is a commodity? What is, you invent, two perfect ideas. One is perfect money, and the second is perfect scarcity. And that leads to property. And then from there, you realize, monetizing any security is an imperfect idea. It's defective because there's always counterparty risk and there's always other risk. And then you realize that all your commodities are defective money because they're not scarcities. And a commodity is inflationary asset, and scarcity is not an inflationary asset. And then what happens next is you realize that most economics is pseudoscience, right? It's all pretty much just people, gaslighting each other. And then you realize that there's a school that's missing in every university, and it's the school of monetary engineering, or even cyber engineering, and the school of aeronautical engineering didn't exist before the Wright brothers. Why would it? Nautical engineering, there would be no school of civil engineering, or there wouldn't be a very big one if we didn't have steel and glass. And, civil engineering with stonework is, it existed, but you don't get so far. It's much, much simpler. And so I would say that, the impact of Bitcoin was it caused me to rethink politics. We talked about charity. Every charity is defective, right? I said, how do you avoid having parasites loot your legacy? Well, before Bitcoin, the answer is you don't. Right? The entire history of charity is like, I see people today, they go on Twitter and they complain about how Rockefeller wrecked the world. Okay? Well, and then they say, because Rockefeller was against this and that and the other thing. Well, the truth is Rockefeller had a lot of money left at the charity, and 3 generations after Rockefeller's gone and he's dead and he's buried, someone that's a bureaucrat that took over has redirected some money that he left to do something which may or may not be ethical. Rockefeller didn't do it, right? If Rockefeller, had lived today, Rockefeller would be buying Bitcoin as a treasury asset. You can be sure, Rockefeller is very interested in, I think, a lot of virtuous things. And in fact, a great example. People say Rockefeller gave us all this medical industrial complex and all the, and all the over doctoring and all the corrupt medical programs. Well, the truth of the matter is Rockefeller didn't believe in most medicine. He believed in homeopathic medicine. He didn't believe in prescription drugs. He didn't believe in surgeries. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He didn't trust doctors. And he lived to be 99 3/4. And all the doctors that he endowed with all of the billions to create all the medical schools and all the medical centers and engage in all the iatrogenic treatments and all the drugs you don't need and all the surgeries you don't need, they all died before him, much earlier ages, right? But yet, 100 years later, people say, well, Rockefeller did this to us. He did. No. If he was here alive today, he would say the opposite of what 99% of the people think he said. And so, bringing it back to Bitcoin, Bitcoin causes you to rethink charity, you rethink religion, you rethink politics, you rethink economics, you rethink investment theory, the entire money manager market, right? If you got rid of every mutual fund and every money manager and every news organization that covers every one of those financial instruments, and you just took your money, bought Bitcoin, right? You would get a better result.
Yep.
and you would basically dematerialize the entire thing. So I never really thought about, how important it was to obsess over financial news every minute of the day. And Bitcoin suggests that maybe it's not as important as you thought it was. And so I would say, Bitcoin is pretty profound because it in essence introduces the entire cybernetic theory of truth, right? A cybernetic theory that transcends all of our arts, all of our sciences, all of our politics. And, in Robert Heinlein, he has his book, Tunnel in the Sky, and they figure out how to open a stargate. And the star, if you look right there and you said, okay, there's a portal right there, I'm going to open it up, and it punches through 500 light years to a G-type planet, and you can go live there, and it's a new Earth, and it's unspoiled, it's undiscovered country, and it's not corrupted. Maybe there's a few creatures living in the jungle, you can clear some, but start again. And if I change the coordinates, it'll go 15,000 light years in the other direction, and there's another beautiful planet, a bit more water on it, and it'll go 25,000 light years in that direction, and there's a third beautiful planet. That one's a little bit warmer. And you go this way, there's a fourth beautiful planet. There's a lot of sand and sandworms on it. They produce something called spice. I don't know, whatever.
It must flow.
Right? And now, instead of being stuck on this earth, with the legacy of all of our thousands of years of our petty political fights and religious fights and every other authoritarian fight, you can go through that portal. And now I invite you to consider, how does that impact all of your values and all of your hopes and all of your aspirations and everything you've been taught and everything you were led to believe that you had to live with? And is it at all going to change the way you live the rest of your life?
Is it fair to say, to put a capstone on that Bitcoin represents a type of intellectual and even, dare I say, spiritual awakening for you?
Yeah. Basically invites you to rethink everything you've learned in your entire life. Satoshi opened a portal into cyberspace, and when you go through it, when you go through it, it offers the promise that you can remake and perfect your property rights, your political rights, your intellectual, self. There's just not your keys, not your coin, and you talked about not your keys, and I'm saying not your keys, not yourself. And so I guess the portal invites you to reimagine yourself and reimagine everything you ever learned. And once your eyes are opened, you see it all differently. And you interpret all of human history differently. Right? The reason I enjoy reading Murray Rothbard is he's telling me 1,000 stories of the human condition of struggle and what people wanted and how they achieved it partially until they had it taken away from them, and how they reacted, and how then they struck out again to re-achieve it. And it's the history of the world is the flickering of the flame of liberty and hope and aspiration and virtue continually being stomped on by a parasite, snuffed out. Someone sneaks away the little flame to another jurisdiction. They restart the flame. They grow again until it collapses under its own weight of corruption and chaos and entropy. And then the flame keeps flickering, and it's running from place to place until Satoshi lit a flame in cyberspace. He started a fire in cyberspace, and that fire was just a little flicker 10, 15 years, 14 years ago, and now it's a decent sized fire, and there's no reason to think it wouldn't burn for thousands of years across the universe. And that is the fire of freedom and truth and justice and virtue. right? And how can that not cause you to reinterpret the human condition and everything that you believe to be true before the advent of Bitcoin?